Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Today we have 3 brand new stories, starting with a short one to warm you up. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story. You want to speak to my manager instead of me? Sure. Prior to being a bartender, I worked at a retail chain called Big W. I'm a nerd. I tend to switch to autopilot when tired, almost always at the end of shifts, and can be a jerk when annoyed. Me in a nutshell. It's a slow Wednesday afternoon, the AC is broken again, and it's about 5 degrees Celsius hotter inside than outside, 29 Celsius. I'm on autopilot, rigor mortis smile on my face, and retail greetings are droning out of my throat. A guy walks into my register demanding a refund for something trivial. Probably his panties were the wrong color, I don't remember. I inform him in a monotone voice that refunds are issued by my supervisor, not me. There's a surprisingly substantial line at the supervisor's desk, people wanting cigarettes, refunds, or information. He informs me that he's not waiting that long for something trivial. He demands I do it because even someone as dumb as you can do this. Well, that snapped me out of autopilot, and the smile fades. I repeat in a much more direct tone that only the supervisor can do refunds. The customer's having none of it. Refund my item. He demands again, saying it very slowly, as if I was the dumbest potato in the strawberry patch. I'm unable to... He cuts me off. I want to speak to your manager. I don't want to talk to you. Now, this is where people need to be careful with their words. As a cashier, I report directly to my supervisor, one of the 2 at the desk. They're in charge of me. My manager sits out back managing the store and usually never has to interact with customers unless the supervisor calls him. So I nod, calling through the headset for my manager. Let's call him Fred. Fred's a great guy. He tells good jokes, he's always ready to help his friends, and he's a caring soul. He's also a mute. And after wrapping his ute around a tree as a teen, he's also deaf. As such, he knows Auslan, Australian Sign Language, but can't read lips to save his life. I also can't speak Auslan at all. This probably took about 5 minutes for someone to alert Fred that he was needed and for him to come down. All this time I'm smiling, but not saying a word to the gentleman, as he told me to. He comes up to the register, sees me waving him down, and pulls out his PDA to communicate with me. What's up? Fred types. I take the PDA and type, customer has a complaint, wants to speak to my manager, not me. Fred raises an eyebrow at me, and I just shrug. The guy's turning red with anger, probably thinking we're ignoring him. Fred turns to the guy who launches into a full-on verbal assault that would curdle milk chocolate. Something about incompetent employees and terrible service. Fred just stands there. Eventually, the guy runs out of breath, and Fred has a chance to show him the PDA with the words, "Sir, I am a deaf mute. Please use this to communicate with me." The guy practically screams and storms out of the store. And our second story. Don't waste your valuable time troubleshooting over the phone. All right, I'll come on site instead. So, a little backstory. I'm a Cisco certified network engineer, and I work for a small managed IT solutions company started by a good friend of mine. Most of our clients are small to medium-sized, spread out all across the state. We pride ourselves on our top-notch customer service and the fact that we haven't lost a single customer in 10 years of doing business. Most of our clients love us for how smoothly we keep things running and how little they actually need to contact us, outside of resetting passwords through Active Directory. All of them except one. One of our clients is a small Catholic diocese, and most of our work is done in a small elementary school they have. Everyone there likes us for the most part, except the secretary, who we'll refer to as Karen from this point forwards. Karen has hated me from day one for whatever reason, but I try my best to ignore her. The problem with this, however, is that for some reason, whenever anyone in the school has an IT problem, they call Karen first, who then forwards the information into our ticketing system or calls us. To be fair to Karen, they aren't meant to do this, as the person with the problem is meant to make the ticket. But the end result is that Karen is always my first point of contact with this client, and it came to the point that I hated seeing this client come into our system or phone lines. Now, normally a network engineer wouldn't be contacted for every little IT problem that could easily be handled by a level 1 help desk technician, But since we're a small company, less than 10 employees, and this client doesn't really have too many issues, I was tasked with dealing with any IT problems they had, as I was the one that originally designed and implemented their network and their other IT needs. What's important about this is that our contract with this client specifically states that they have unlimited hours over the phone for help desk needs and are allotted 8 hours of on-site time every month, and anything more than that will charge them an additional hourly fee. This is very important for later. Now, like I said, Karen never liked me, but I always took the high road for the sake of the company and our reputation. As a result, the small things she would do to inconvenience me would go unchecked. That was until she crossed a line. We had a new client that needed to have a network set up that I'd spent a good month designing, separating VLANs, writing ACLs, designing routing protocols, and other networking stuff. They were a good 4-hour drive away from our office. Anyway, as I'm preparing to leave, a ticket comes in from Karen. One of the teachers apparently got a virus on their personal computer and had brought it in for whatever reason. This is not covered in our contract, as we own all the computers at the school. They just rent, as it's cheaper than buying them all, and personal computers are not to be used on the school's network for security concerns. I shoot off an email explaining the policy, but given that the problem that was described was more than likely caused by a malicious Chrome extension, they're everywhere, I explained in detail how to find and remove it, and they could call and I could walk them through it, how to fix it if they needed help. I fire off the email and think all is well and continue prepping for my trip. Wrong. I'm on site the next day and get a call from my boss saying that the principal of the school called and left an angry voicemail saying that I had told Karen that I refused to help her and typed it in all caps. Luckily, the boss knows me and that I wouldn't do that. And as the boss has full access to our ticketing system, he checked my reply, which was nothing like Karen described. He wasn't upset because I did nothing wrong, but he just wanted to let me know what Karen had tried to do. Now, this put me in a bad mood for the rest of the day, and as I'm silently fuming while setting up the network, my work phone goes off, and guess who it is? Karen. She's calling in because something wasn't working on her computer, and her mood was absolutely foul. I'm assuming her boss chewed her out for lying. I'm trying to help her fix her problem by running some basic diagnostics, and after about 30 minutes, she just yells at me saying that I'm wasting her valuable time and not fixing her problem, and that I should come on site because she refuses to waste any more time with me. All right then, you're the customer. Now, remember when I said that they only get 8 hours of on-site time a month before we charge them by the hour? Keep in mind that this also includes drive time, and their school is an hour away from our office. So 2 hours of travel plus 1 hour minimum, even if I'm only in the school for 5 minutes. Also, remember that Karen is my only point of contact for any problems, big and small, and Karen's valuable time can't be wasted over the phone. So then begins 3 months of not wasting Karen's extraordinarily valuable time. Laptop not booting to Windows and just needs a 30-second hard reset to wipe the memory? Be right there. Monitor not turning on because the cable came loose? On my way. Printer needs to be unplugged and plugged back in to print. Hang tight. You get the picture. For the record, my boss was okay with this as I told him what Karen had said, and he hates her just as much as I do. If the client requests an on-site visit, we are contractually obligated to go. The only reason this was even allowed to keep going on for as long as it did was because Karen was best friends with the principal, and she covered for her. At the end of those 3 months, I estimated Karen racked up close to $20,000 in extra on-site time. On the 4th month, we got a call from the head of finance from the client asking us to come in for a meeting to explain why their quarterly bill was off by $20,000. Both me and my boss show up and explain to the head of finance and the priest, top dog at this diocese, why they got charged so much more than usual, and showed them the documentation citing what Karen had said and all of these on-site requests. We also showed them, for good measure, the incident where Karen had outright lied to get me in trouble to further drive home that this issue was solely a result of Karen. All this was new information for both of them, and they also explained for our benefit why they were now taking a closer look at the school's expenses. Apparently, the principal had been doing some not-so-sanctioned activity using the diocese's funds and had been asked to resign effective immediately, and they were reviewing all the expenses over the last year or so. They thanked us for clearing things up and bringing Karen's behavior to their attention, and we left. I didn't get any calls from that client for a few weeks, and when I went there for their monthly on-site visit, Karen was no longer at her secretary's desk, and someone new was there. I've never smiled wider. And our last story. Sweet revenge on my worst employer ever. 2 years ago, I lived in a touristy area of Ontario and worked as a server and bartender at a fairly well-known Canadian restaurant chain. It's no exaggeration to state the front-of-house manager, FOH, assistant manager, A-man, and general manager, GM, are among 3 of the dumbest people I have ever known in my life. My 4 months working at this place were effing awful and soul-crushing, but the tip money was unreal, so I could tolerate it. This was essentially the management dynamic. FOH was a lazy F who projected his own laziness onto the front-of-house staff. He was prone to giving lectures about how lazy we all were and constantly threatening us with a stack of resumes he had in the office. He would also make insanely creepy remarks about female employees, one of whom was my sister, so super awesome, and racist comments about customers. A-Man was essentially the kind of person who never had any power in her life. She then used her new power to make our lives miserable. Her first order of business was removing any information about workers' rights from the premises. Finally, GM was just a manipulative, sadistic misogynist who was just straight up abusive to female staff. Also, these 3 people hated each other and made no attempt to hide it. Basically, by the end of tourist season, I gave no Fs about my job and wanted out. I started a work-to-rule strike, which supremely slowed down operations in hopes of getting fired. Fortunately, FOH decided to stop scheduling me, which led to an intense confrontation where he was very sure that I, a fairly physically imposing guy, was going to get the crap beat out of him. Instead, I told him to F himself, went home, and read the Employment Standards Act in its entirety. I wrote a lengthy report to the Ministry of Labor citing at least 16 violations of the Employment Standards Act. For the better part of the next year, they were under investigation, which resulted in me getting a payout for termination, constructive dismissal, and them getting a number of fines. The sweetest part being every time I heard from my caseworker, she spent a good amount of our conversation complaining about how awful the management was to deal with. The last I heard from her, the ministry was still doing regular inspections of this restaurant since they've now been red flagged for crappy labor practices. So satisfying. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.